Discovery on Sullivan Island. Now, Real Crime looks at the controversial case of Tony Martin.
A Norfolk farmer was tonight charged with murder after the shooting of two suspected burglars.
The site of the late-night shootings, Bleak House, has been the centre of continued police investigation. One of those burglars, Brendan Ferran, told detectives in an interview that he and an accomplice, Fred Barris, had been inside when Tony Martin had fired at them. The jury heard Martin had told police he did not shout any warning before firing. He'd even allegedly booby-trapped his own staircase, and he'd told police officers that if burglars came onto his property, he'd blow their heads off.
It was a simple burglary that went tragically wrong. The three shots that rang out in this farmhouse saw a 16-year-old boy killed, a middle-aged burglar wounded, and a farmer imprisoned. But the shots reverberated far further, provoking a heated national debate that still runs today. How do you define reasonable force when it comes to defending your own home? This was the man who sparked that debate, a reclusive and eccentric loner named Tony Martin. And this is the Norfolk farm he inherited at the age of 35 after spending much of his adult life away at sea.
And I know a lot of people said he won't last 5 minutes because I'm like a rolling stone. I just suddenly thought, well, there is an opportunity here. It's an opportunity, but I like a challenge.
The home left to him by his uncle was the appropriately named Bleak House. Standing in 200 acres of land, it offered its new, unmarried owner a life of isolation.
It's a place that I've visited all my life, ever since I was a child. My mother used to bring me down here. We'd come down here for Christmas. And to me, I thought it was an idyllic lifestyle.
Idyllic and, some would say, chaotic. Once Tony Martin moved in, the house rapidly fell into disrepair. These pictures of the interior were taken in 1999.
I knocked it all around about 20 years ago. Lots of people actually do things and then they wish they hadn't, then they make a mess of things. Well, I like to do things right, so things take a long time to do. There is a thing about keeping the railings painted white, isn't there? Well, I'm not one of those people. I don't really worry too much what other people say.
I think Tony doesn't understand how normal people live, or ordinary people live, because he's so used to his own way of life and it doesn't bother him one bit, and he's lived on his own all his adult life. He can't see that it's absolutely appalling. I mean, he likes to sleep on the floor. He sleeps in his clothes, so he wears the clothes day in, day out, sometimes for weeks.
When Tony Martin first moved here in the late 1970s, crime was virtually unheard of. But 20 years on, things were very different. Rural police stations had closed, criminal activity had spread from town to countryside, and suddenly the small Norfolk community felt under siege.
Everybody keeps themselves to themselves. I'm just fed up of everything getting stolen left, right and centre. If it's not bolted to the ground, it walks.
Michelle and Paul Morton know at first hand what it's like to be the victims of a break-in.
Feel like a victim, like prisoner in our own home.
The break-in can be over in a matter of seconds.
Mr. and Mrs. Johnson have been left shocked and distressed by this burglary.
Police are appealing to people not to become a burglary statistic and to protect their homes.
By the late 90s, Tony Martin had himself become a statistic. He'd also apparently lost faith in those whose job it was to protect him.
He didn't like the way that the police no longer had an interest in guarding the community. He was very uptight about the robberies and thefts he's had at his house recently. and particularly so in the last year, because he had several break-ins, and prior to that he'd had lots of thefts on his farm machinery, farm tools, etc. Yeah, he was a bit fed up about that, yes.
It wasn't just burglars who had upset her son. Sometime earlier, he had had a run-in with suspected trespassers on his land.
I asked him again, who are you? And he wouldn't tell me. And I said, right, I want you to leave. Anyway, one thing led to another, got into a hell of an argument. And he said, I don't like you. And in the end, I fired at the back wheel of his vehicle, and off he went.
As a result of this incident, Tony Martin had his firearms licence revoked. By 1999, Norfolk's rural community was starting to fight back. They banded together to form an anti-crime group known as Farm Watch. Among those demanding action from the police was Tony Martin.
I first met Tony Martin at a Farm Watch meeting that had been called by the local residents who were deeply concerned about what was happening with the crime patterns in that area. They'd managed to hire a local hall to come along and discuss the way forward, what was happening, and the way that they want to know what Farm Watch suggested in dealing with it.
But although the community were getting organised, the local crime wave showed no sign of stopping. In May 1999, Tony Martin was burgled again. At another Farm Watch meeting shortly afterwards, Martin's frustration boiled over. He was overheard saying, "You know the best way to stop them? Shoot the bastards." He added that if a particular team of burglars returned, he'd blow their heads off. It was enough to alarm the group's organiser, a retired police firearms officer.
I told Norfolk Police of the interview that I'd had. I checked as best I could that he wasn't in possession of a firearm, and had been reassured by the local population, no, that's just Tony, so he's not the sort of person that you would immediately put down as somebody that would go out of his way to shoot anybody.
August the 20th, 1999, and in the late afternoon, a team of thieves set off from Newark to burgle Bleak House, some 70 miles away. Their 32-year-old driver, Darren Bark, a professional thief with more than 50 convictions. The 29-year-old gang leader, Brendan Fearon, another convicted criminal with over 30 offences on his record. Both had robbed Tony Martin's farm just 3 months earlier. But today, joining them for the first time, is a 16-year-old boy, Fred Barris. This is Fearon's account of the break-in, taken from later police statements.
When Darren had dropped us off, I dropped the torch out from under my jumper and I put my gloves on. We walked along the road onto the gravel to look at this house here. We was going to rob it. I could hear noises and I didn't know what the noise was. I saw a big dog in the middle of the track growling at us, and Fred said, "It's a dog, it's a dog."
Tony Martin's 3 Rottweilers were loose in the grounds.
I was just setting as though to kick it and it got vicious. Fred shouted, "There's another one," and he's holding my shoulder. Before I knew it, it had me back against the wall. I heard a smash,